The role of narratives in politics and personality. Robert Shiller, the founder of behavioral economics and Nobel Prize winner in economics in 2013, says, narratives are central to human thinking and motivation. Narratives stimulate emotions. They are often a simple story, easily expressed explanation of events that many people bring up on news or social media, and narratives can be used to stimulate concerns or emotions. A narrative appears to advance self-interest of those who tell the narrative, and a narrative mostly has some human interest, either direct or implied. And it's a gem for a conversation, something people like to talk about. Narratives are contagious. They may take the form of an extraordinary tale, or a heroic tale, or a joke. They are not generally a researched story, and they may have glaring holes like urban legends. The form of the narrative varies through time and across tellings, and mutations spring up randomly. But a narrative maintains a core, contagious element. And it's successful in spreading, it is contagious. Narrative generate changes, and this is the reason why I include this topic in a lecture about conflict management. Narratives can be based on varying degrees of truth. They can be used or abused for propaganda. Wishful thinking may enhance the contagion, and we have to ask about the context. What is the reason people like to spread the narrative now and this topic? Narratives are contagious, and mutated narratives generate unpredictable changes in the economy. Robert Shiller says, popular narratives may have a spirit of us versus them. Let's look at some examples. In this picture, you see a very old narrative. You see Abraham, who is about to sacrifice his son Isaac to God, but before he really kills his boy, an angel appears and delivers a goat. So this is where the word scapegoat comes from, because the goat is sacrificed instead of Isaac. Genocides start with narratives. In 1904 to 1908, in Namibia, Germans killed thousands of Nama and Herero. It started with colonialism. For instance, Adolf Lüderitz, who in 1883 claimed that he bought this land of Nama and Herero, but as we know about colonialism, the circumstances of such transactions are debatable. So in the early 1900s, Lothar von Trotha is reported to have said, I think that the nation as such must be destroyed. So Germany has the sad privilege to have made the first genocide that was called genocide in history. Genocides start with narratives, and one part of these narratives is the dehumanization, the taking away human dignity from humans. The German word Untermenschen, directly translated subhumans, or regarding humans like animals under the idea that animals are creatures you can just slaughter. So the dehumanization, that's also part of many narratives. You can also find this in the younger German history. The German expression would be Ungeziefer, like vermin or bugs. Or if you look at the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, he would talk about cleaning the city, nettoyer la cité, and he would use a certain instrument for it, and we'll see it on the next page, carchériser. He would drive people out of the streets like dirt from a walkway with Kercher, carchériser. So if you look at the scapegoat, you will find many narratives that run along the line, all global problems are caused by name any scapegoat. So this is the brand Kercher that was quoted by Nicolas Sarkozy, carchériser, Kerchern. Let's look at the dehumanization. You might know from your smartphones that certain algorithms sort your pictures into categories like skyscrapers, airplanes, cars, and so forth. In 2015, it appeared that one smartphone user found his dark-skinned friends sorted into a category that was named gorillas. Don't think that either Google nor Apple solved this problem by fixing their algorithms. You can look at an article by the New York Times from May 2023, where Google's photo app still can't find gorillas, neither can Apple's. Why? Because they simply took out the word gorilla. Another example from the younger German history is about forced deportation of East German citizens away from the inner German border in 1952. Last year I visited a museum in Streufdorf, which you can see on the map, and along this green line within Eastern Germany, the East German government pulled through a project they called Aktion Ungeziefer, like Project Vermin, because they resettled and deported the citizens who they thought were not reliable enough to live so close to the inner German border. Worst example, the industrialized deportation and killing of millions of people is a singular German invention. In 2022, I visited Auschwitz in Poland, the most terrible death camp the Germans ever built. And I could see that this was not just something like a gulag or a big prison. It was a death camp where people on an industrial scale were killed by gas and gas chambers. The corpses were put into these metal trays and burned. Germany and the Germans have tried very hard to learn from this history. So one German narrative today is, we make many efforts to learn from our past, and we do not want to let such things ever happen again. And please note, I did not write or say we have learned from our past, but we make many efforts and we still have to. Some of these narratives have very strong pictures also. In this picture you see former Chancellor Willy Brandt, 1970, in the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial. After he had put down the flowers, he went down on his knees. That was a mighty powerful picture for many, many Germans and also internationally, because it was unthought of that a top German politician would go on his knees in remembering the many, many Jews that have been killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. Some of you might know the Steven Spielberg movie Schindler's Liste, about an industrial company in Germany where many Jews had been saved. And at the end of this movie, you can see the survivors in Israel and also in Germany. And you can also see them in Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem, that's the place in Israel where it means the hand of the just, the hand of the righteous. And it's a very special place to remember people who did something good to save Jews from dying and brutality. In 2020, it was the first time that a German head of state, our President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, was invited to speak. And that's also something very special according the German past and also the German present, trying to learn from the past. You can also look this up on our government page. The federal government of Germany takes action to fight anti-Semitism. You can find this information in German and in English. Narratives are a means to shape people's thinking. Narratives transport stereotypical patterns of storytelling, like the cruel man who saved a poor man and gave him clothes, like it is told in the story of Saint Martin, or many stories of three sisters or brothers where the youngest is betrayed by the elders, like in the Cinderella story, or magic creatures who will help you if you meet them with kindness, like Dobby in the story of Harry Potter. You'll find narratives that touch on identity politics. There actually are some people in Germany called Reichsbürger who claim that Germany is not a real state because in their sense there was never a peace treaty after the Second World War. Or you can use narratives in political warfare like they stole the vote, or there is a deep state, everything is rigged. That's something we hear from Donald Trump in the US. Or this was always our land, or they broke their promise, which you can find narratives about in many countries, not only Palestine and Israel. Narratives can fuel personal and international conflicts. Conflicts can be deeply rooted in a culture's social system. So often these narratives start or contain taboos. Don't go there, stories about that this is a bad place, or don't socialize. These people are not human and do not ask about this taboo. And any culture, any country can develop a morale that tells the people in this culture, this is how you should behave. So the society learns and practices, we punish those who don't behave. And the individual learns, I will be cast out if I don't comply. So you might remember from our session 1, 3 elements of personality by Sigmund Freud. We have the id, our physical needs, our drives, our desires, that is innate, we're born with it. Or our superego, our moral guidelines, norms, religion, ideals, what we learn from our family, from our parents or teachers. And step by step, we develop our ego, our identity, our self-esteem, and a certain consciousness. So that's what we learn when we grow up and develop, hopefully, into an adult. So what happens in such a society where people are constantly confronted with these taboos? Don't go there, don't socialize, these are not human people. The superego tells you all the time, they are different from us, they are not valid, they are not human. The ego is not built in a positive way, but very strongly concentrated on this enemy. I am not like them. I don't do things they do. And the id, our needs and drives and fear, the id is constantly concentrated on, I want to belong. My group must feed and protect me. So there's a certain portion of fear in this. What happens is that although we have an individual choice, this is not an easy choice because our superego constantly tells us, you should not want this, you should not do this. The ego may ask, who am I? Who am I really? And our id, our needs, drives of fear, fluster, I'm afraid to do something wrong and I'm afraid to be punished. So it's a hard choice between the morale, especially if you're surrounded by a repressive culture that demands your full compliance, and on the other side, your choice for enlightenment, that you accept, that you wonder about certain narratives or stories, that you doubt whether the information you receive is true, that you ask people you trust or people you challenge, and that you finally explore and find out for yourself. So, although we have this individual choice, it depends very much on our living circumstances, whether we have the energy and the surroundings to be able to ask these questions at all. Our cultural mental programming has consequences if we think about we and they a lot of time. Geert Hofstede, in his chapter about we and they, says, identity answers the question, to which group do I belong? So identity is not something we developed without relation to other people, just the contrary. We want to belong. Humans are social beings, so identity answers the question, to which group do I belong? Groups have certain membership attributes, like certain clothes or a certain way to speak. Group membership attributes are attributes that are esteemed among people who matter to you. So you wear the kind of clothing where you know this clothing means something positive for the people who matter to you. You comply. Then there is a difference between many societies. The degree to which groups penalize, the degree to which groups sanction deviant symbolic identities and behaviors differs enormously across societies. So in more liberal societies, you can pretty much say and do what you want without having to fear severe punishment. But in repressive societies, you constantly live with the fear that your behavior, your identity, or your symbolic identity, like a question of what kind of clothes you wear, do you cover your head, and so forth, can be penalized. Many groups have strong prohibitions against leaving. In Germany, for instance, you can see this up to this very day in the religious fraction of the so-called Jehovah's Witnesses. If a member of this community says, I don't believe in this religion anymore and I would like to quit, it is very hard for the family and for the neighbors and for the other members of this community to still keep in contact with the person who's leaving. Narratives and mental programming. Let's come to some conclusions. Our cultural upbringing contains many narratives. To learn narratives is to train patterns of thinking. Families can cultivate their specific narratives. The way we talk about who we are can be a narrative, like you tell your life story like the famous Bollywood movie Slumdog Millionaire, or you tell your life story like you are a hero who has overcome many obstacles. Narratives shape the way we tell stories, and narratives shape the way we take in news. Narratives influence the way we perceive other people, whether we perceive other people as enemies, as allies, as simply other people, as people we can be curious about. Narratives influence this. And enlightenment will try to reveal such patterns, and enlightenment will try to find truth. Taboos and enlightenment. Which conclusions can we draw here? Our cultural upbringing can be more or less restrictive. And this also depends on our reference group, for instance, on our family, how strict our family or how liberal our family is or was. Enlightenment can mean to transgress the taboo of asking. We dare to ask questions that are sanctioned in our family or our society. The development of a balanced ego and a stable identity needs a certain amount of personal choices. So if we want to find out who we are and who we want to be, and if we want to make these choices, if we want to enjoy such a freedom, it means that at a certain point we need to ask certain questions, be they under a taboo or not. A weak and unstable ego that depends too strongly on others can lead to a narcissistic adaptation. So if we constantly focus on what others think of us, how others may punish or cherish us, that can lead to a narcissistic adaptation or to a constant suppression of one's impulses. If you constantly comply in a restrictive culture, this can make you sick. So the positive thing would be to have an appreciative reference group. Friends, students in your class, teachers, a family, an appreciative reference group that fosters open-minded discussions, because this will also foster the development of healthy egos in its members. If you read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, this is a wonderful life story about an appreciative reference group. Her mother used to tell their kids, "Family, this is the place where you are liked." I see our students' class as such an appreciative reference group. I explained the circular model for conflict resolution with a very tough topic, with the topic, which diplomatic approach for the freeing or exchange or treating the hostages in Palestine and Israel, which diplomatic approaches can be taken. It was a tough discussion, and I hoped that our open-minded class was ready to tackle such a difficult topic. Conflict management and intercultural management, what are our conclusions? It is worth noticing, revealing, and asking about taboos in a society in order to reduce hostile mental programming. As much as we are culturally programmed, we can still seek enlightenment and gain more knowledge. The choice to see every human being as human, no matter how big the conflict or crime, makes us human. And for me as a German, that's not an easy thing to say, because this is the difference between Nazi Germany and hopefully today's Germany, to see every human being as human. No matter what, no matter where he or she comes from, no matter which niceties or terrible things this person has done, to see every human being as human. And that's what we need to tackle present and future conflicts.